human is here and is aware of mostly their human life. You're aware of waking up, going to bed, eating, and doing all the rest of these. What you're not so aware of is what's happening in the other realms. You're not aware of it because of the veil, for one thing, this barrier almost. It's a gravitational-based barrier that keeps emotions, thoughts, and mass, objects, like an apple, within this reality sphere. You know that there's something else out there, and that's kept you going in your journey. You know there's much more, and there is. The realities that I speak about are the other realms that are all around. They're intersecting with this carbon-based, atomic-based realm that you're in. They're intersecting all the time, but you simply don't see them because your human consciousness is focused on this reality. And the belief is this is reality. And you keep incarnating back into it. But as you allow and understand some of the basic principles of consciousness and energy, you can literally expand your consciousness beyond this realm into the others, the realms where you could say the spirit beings are, the realms of the dead who are alive on the other side. You can expand into that. You can expand into the realms of the truly non-atomic structure-based realities. You can expand into the realms of the past, present, and future, all in the now. You can expand into the realms of what we call the crystalline realms, the creative realms, all that are there. It's not like a digital realm that is being created right now, but all these realms, all of these houses and mansions of the self are already there. You've simply been focused right here. In order to do that, it simply is about allowing. It's simply about recognizing that, yes, you are operating within a very structured, very tight, gravitational-based reality, but there is more. You're already dreaming in these other realms, but you start remembering the dreamings. And then it gets very confusing because the mind is trying to understand all this, but then you tell the mind to shut up and you go beyond. And pretty soon you're walking in many worlds at the same time. You're no longer restricting your consciousness to this reality. You're now in awareness some of the time, maybe all of the time, of the other realms. You think that you have to find a way to get there, but you don't. They're a natural part of your being. You've been focused here in this reality for a long time. It's been a lot of fun. Well, it's been some fun. It's been a lot of experience. Realms that are truly free for you to explore yourself, almost indefinable in human terms, crystalline realms where you literally just walk, metaphorically speaking, but walk within yourself into the beautiful, deep corridors of yourself, long forgotten after you came to earth, after you embodied into this very, very tight realm. You realize that a part of you was always wandering into these other realms, but just forgotten by the mind, forgotten when you return from your dreams at night. Every once in a while you'd catch a glimpse or a glitter of these other realms and then think of their beauty, of their freedom, but think that they are beyond you. They're somewhere else. Those realms, those new dimensions are not new at all. They're already here. You've been fighting for a long time to change this reality. You've been battling and stressing, how do I change this reality, that my bio-reality? How do I bring in the magic? Well, just let this reality be as it is right now. Remember, it's filled with mass consciousness and a lot of very tight physics. Let yourself be in these other realities and realms. That will give you the understanding now of what to do to change what you choose to change in this realm. There are realities out there that are all within your consciousness, realities of great quiet and solitude, realities of incredible sensuality, realities of immense creative expression, realities and realms that are so deep and personal and meaningful. Open yourself up to these. Now, don't go out there. You're not going to fly out there. Opening up to it, letting those come into your presence. Your presence right now, your consciousness now being in this reality, in this realm, but let those other beautiful realms of self come here, now commingling with this reality. When you find that you're wondering about it, you're saying, well, it sounds so wonderful, but I just can't do it. Stop there, stop. You are already doing it. You are. It's always amazing to me. The human says, well, I've tried. There's just nothing there. I can't get into the other realms. You're trying to blast yourself into those realms. You're trying to leave your point of consciousness right here. Don't. Those realms are already here. Those other realities are already here. They're all around you. They're orbiting all around you right now. It's just that your focus has been only this realm. Let those other realms come to you. Don't go out there. You don't have to do any certain yoga position. You don't have to drink soy milk or anything like that. It's just stopping for a moment, taking a deep breath and realizing it's already here. It's already here. You literally live in many different realities at a time. Now let them come to you here. Let them join you in this experience. Multi-reality consciousness where you can be here as a human, shining your light. You can also at this very moment in this realm be in your crystalline energies all at once, no longer confined to singularity of this physical realm. None of this is difficult. It's actually quite natural. Take a moment to breathe it in, to feel into the energies of this transformation. This is what your soul have been waiting for. This is the time you've been waiting for. This isn't just another event. This isn't just another harmonic convergence or Y2K or anything like that. I have given it the name of Heaven's Cross because indeed that's what happens. The heavens, the dimensions start to intersect. They start to cross. This is what has been foretold and prophesied for a long, long time. This is what you dreamed of in the times of Atlantis and the temples of Tien. This was the Atlantean dream, coming to this point where no longer are you limited here as a human on Earth to just this realm. Now when you can open up to the other realms. I ask you to imagine a room now. A beautiful room, an elegant room with 2 doors at the end. This room represents you, represents the workings of the mind, and it represents your human as 3Ds, and this is your room. It has 2 doors. The door on the left is the door we use to go out into the other realms. The door on the right is the door we use to return. And it's very important to go out one door and return through the other. Because if you try coming back in the same door that you left through, that you exited from, if you try to come back in the same door, it will simply negate the experiences that you have in the other realms. Because in the other realms, you learn so much, you experience so much. You want to come back in a different way through that other door. So now let's begin our journey. We will go out the left door, together into the other realms. Let's begin now. Going beyond. You are here and you are beyond. Even though if the mind could not previously comprehend this, now that is changing. Let's go out the door now. Out into the vast, vast expanses of your consciousness, of your being. Out the door into the other realms, your realms, the realms of your soul. You come here often, but the brain simply doesn't translate it, can't interpret it until now. And here are all the potentials. There is no time or space here. Again, it's something the mind simply cannot understand. Out here, you have already gone through the experience. Whatever it is, you've gone through it out here. Nothing is actually new, other than experiencing it in the literal 3D on Earth. Nothing is new. Out here, in these magical realms of yourself, beyond time and space, in the magic of who you truly are, there's no beginning and end to any experience. There's no resolution to problems, because there are no problems out here. There's no time frame in which they occur. There's really not even a logical progression of or sequence of events that build together to create a finale. Out here is just pure experience. And that experience ultimately relates to what you experience as the human self on the planet. The human mind now, it backs down, it gives permission. It says, you have the maturity, you have the balance and the grace now. For me to back down as the mind that controlled and limited everything. The human mind says there has always been a part of the mind that had the ability to perceive, to understand on an intuitive level other things that were going on. Once in a while, it would show up. Once in a while, it would pop into your life. But most of the time, it lay waiting in the background until you were ready. Here, in your dream worlds, which is simply the potentials of your soul out here, all things, all magic, all possibilities are real. You've already created them. You've already been here. Even if you have jamais vu, denying that you have, not remembering, no, you have been here before. Every night. Different levels, different layers. But then, at the end of your night, at the end of your dreams, you try going back in that same door you came out of. You try interpreting through the mind, through the left side of the mind. And then it's forgotten or misinterpreted. Out here, you don't need a language of words or symbols. Out here, you don't need mathematics. Out here is the beauty of all things that will come to be. Out here are the potentials, and you've already created all of them. Let yourself feel into this grand field of déjà vu. I have already created this. You're in your soul. You're in all of your experiences. Why is this here? What purpose does it serve? Because it means you can choose anything you want. You can choose any of these stories, any of the experiences. You can choose to go through a difficult, challenging experience, which some like to do just for the challenge. You can experience to go through the darkness. You can experience ease, grace, abundance, and bring that back with you. This is yours. This is for you, and you have earned the right to be here now. You've earned the right to access and to bring back the stories that are here in your soul, that are here in your potentials. And yes, there is every iteration of every story. It's almost infinite. You come out here every night. You come out here often in your daydreams, but you try going back through the same door. And then all is forgotten in the workings of the ancient mind. But now we're going to go back in through the other door. The other door representing the fact that you've gone out here into a different type of experience, into a different type of consciousness. And the other door saying, something has happened to me out here. I've experienced something out here. I have tasted of my own soul out here, and now I'll go back through the other door. The door of déjà vu, rather than the door of jamais vu. Let's do that now. Let's come back to the room. The realms will always stay there. They don't go away. It's simply you're coming back into a more focused, a more defined reality called 3D. Let's come back in through the right door now, back into the room. When you come back here now, you brought the essence of the experience, whether the experience is your own enlightenment, whether the experience is bringing in your own light body, whether the experience is having a challenge in front of you, but already knowing you've gone through it, already knowing that it's something you've experienced, and already knowing that you've chosen in your soul to have it as something so satisfactory to you, so completing in you, so harmonious with you, that you no longer have to go through bad experiences, painful experiences. You don't have to go through those anymore. That is a thing of the past. Having already gone through the experience, but now bringing it into this realm means there is no worry or fear. There is no wondering if it's going to work out, no wondering if you're going to live or die, if it's going to be success or failure. You've already gone through it, déjà vu. But now bringing it here. Now you can be in ease and grace going through anything, whether it's just something in your own life, whether you believe it's happening on a planetary basis. You go through anything and realize you've already chosen it. No need to worry. No need to fear. No need to hide yourself anymore. You've already chosen it, and why would you choose anything but the highest for yourself? Now is the time to receive that light of the divinity that's been shielded in so many ways from this, what's called the veil, or the separation between the heavens. Now is the time to allow that light to come in. And as you do, as the heavens cross, as this opening occurs, more of your light. This is not a global light. This is not a planetary thing. It's for you individually. More of your true light and consciousness comes in. And when it does, and when you allow it in, allow it to serve you in your life, then you start expanding in consciousness. Not as some of you thought I was saying expanding your body. No, your consciousness, your clarity, your perception and awareness, they expand. And they expand now with ease into these other realms. So now you're not accessing just your human level, but you've expanded safely into the other realms, where now you realize that you are a timeless being, where you are a souled being. You are much more than a human going through challenging experiences. So it's kind of like light comes in, you allow and receive, and then you expand into the other realms. And now you have this beautiful cycle occurring of light and allowing and expansion and going into the other realms, where you become much more aware of all that you are, your other senses that go beyond the human senses of the divine play that you've been in for so very long. The changes have to do with you now getting back into connection with your I am, with your God self, with your divinity, with your soul, whatever you want to call it. It's the thing that deep within your heart you've yearned for more than anything else. Some of you think it's a soulmate or whatever, but deep within you, ever since you've been here on earth, you've been yearning to reconnect with Source, yourself. And that's what starts happening. You start maybe feeling a little different. You start maybe, it's not that you're necessarily going to hear words, your soul is starting to talk in your native language to you, but you're going to feel that there's a sense of connection. Part of you is going to wonder what that connection is. Well, it's your divinity. Part of you is going to wonder how you can accelerate that. Don't. Just take a deep breath and allow. It's the very best thing you could do for yourself. Allowing means doesn't involve other people. Allowing is about allowing yourself, you, the human, to now reconnect with your divine nature here on earth in this body, not necessarily just having to go off into the other heavens, but right here on earth. So much of you wasn't here. I call it divinity, but so much of you just wasn't here, and you've been waiting for that, and it's been difficult because of the gravitational forces, the barriers in between the realms, and suddenly you have access to it. So many of you have thought you were crazy or going crazy, and you've done everything you can to keep yourself from going crazy, but you weren't at all. Things were being acted out in the other realms or felt in the other realms, and just was very difficult to bring them here. That opens up now. It opens up all what you would call that magic, that it opens up all the joy. It opens up for you to be here with you now. The significance of this is with Heaven's Cross. For the semi or fully enlightened being, that veil starts to fall apart. When the light hits it, no longer is it scattered into a variety of different waveforms. Now that light, some of that light can go right through it directly, almost like a laser. That light carries your divinity. There's still going to be some days where you just don't feel it as free as other days initially. But what's happening now is the light of the soul is like a focused laser beam, piercing and penetrating that gravitational force. That's what your soul rides in on. And that's what comes to you here in this realm. That also provides the ability for you to sense and to feel into the other realms. So you're no longer just contained here on this planet as just the human. Many humans, many Shaumbra, they're just getting by. They're just surviving. They're living day to day, and they're so longing for their soul, for oftentimes said as God, but they're so longing for to know the God within again. So longing for that part of them that is off in the other realms. The other part is doing fine, but wanting it to be back here. Heaven's Cross opens all that up. It allows the beam of light to bypass the heavy effects of gravity so that even the divinity can be here with you.